Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society, his website resourceworks.com, his Twitter handle at SJMuir. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Why, thank you, Jim.
The federal cabinet is huddled up in a retreat, perhaps mapping out how they plan to get the Canadian economy going. What should they be looking at?
Well, what should they be looking at and what are they looking at might be two different things. In terms of what they should be looking at, we need a restart to the economy that builds jobs and communities back up. We have small businesses that have been going under. It's entirely possible that with a second wave of COVID, there will be a second wave of economic suffering. And how long can we just keep living on the national credit card to pay for it all, spending hundreds of billions of dollars on the social supports? Well, apparently the federal government thinks we can do that forever. If you're a banker, if you're an economist, if you're a business person, you think, well, there might be a limit to that. And so in light of this, recently I worked on a task force for real jobs, real recovery. We published a number of recommendations. Broadly speaking, we think that in Canada, given the realities of our economy, the number one thing that the federal government can do, our number one recommendation that we made, was simply to recognize that this is so, that natural resources are at the heart of any recovery we have. We actually have recommended that the Prime Minister in the throne speech coming up publicly and vocally endorse the Canadian natural resource brand and then start working in partnerships with industries to improve the policies and processes and regulations. Is this happening now? I do think there are some promising signs. I don't want to be, I don't want to give the impression that, it's all bad, but I think there is also this force on the government trying to pull it into spending $100 billion on initiatives. They call it a green recovery. Maybe it's more than $100 billion. We don't really know yet. That will placate, the eco-lobbyists, but not necessarily create lasting jobs or, I think more importantly, add to GDP. And the way you add to GDP is you create exports. That's the way you grow the economy. Cause foreigners to buy your goods such that they give you money, which you can then use to buy other goods that you need. That's trade. And right now, the idea of trade, which is so simple, seems to be missing in action. Really all we need to do is increase our GDP and increase our ability to trade, and you can solve your problems. That's always been true, and it's no less true now. We aren't in a new reality where if you wish there to be a green recovery, it'll just happen. It doesn't work that way. Although maybe, the government is done by polls nowadays to a great extent, and maybe if enough people think that, then you will see governments doing things simply to attract those votes, not necessarily to pursue a rational economic policy. So we'll see what happens.
Is it time for some leadership that would ignore polls and just do the right thing?
I think if you did a poll on that question, there would be wide agreement on it, Jim.
BC has already instituted a clean fuel standard. They're thinking about doing that federally. What will that do to the pocketbook of the average Canadian and business?
Well, the number one thing that you hear is, oh, don't worry, you'll be getting a check back. It's been always somewhat convincing when we hear the federal government say that, this is about putting money back in your pocketbook, because it's a tax. It's taking money out of your pocketbook is what it is. And when you hear it sold as being the exact opposite, I guess what they're trying to say is, look, we're recycling tax credits back to lower income people who will be disadvantaged by this. The rest of you, well, big deal. It's your problem. So they're not really, creating wealth with a new tax. They're harvesting income for the government. In BC, when the carbon tax started in 2008, it was a revenue neutral tax, and we lobbied for that. I remember at the Vancouver Sun, Don Kao was writing a lot in those days. I'd worked with him very closely, and that was a principle that we applauded when the BC Liberal government came out with it, revenue neutrality. And so all these revenues were redistributed. And so the idea is that the tax would serve to discourage the things that the government didn't want as much of and encourage things that it did want more of. That's sort of a principle of a sin tax, I guess. You charge people for liquor and you spend it on other things, tobacco. So that's how fuel tax was approached, and it didn't really last that long. After a number of years, the revenues raised by the carbon tax were put into the film tax credit and stuff like that. What's that got to do with the environment anyways? And then it was just totally abandoned a few years ago. There's some pretense that it flows back, some revenue flows back to low-income people who are penalized by paying 9 cents extra for their gasoline today, which is what the carbon tax is in BC. And so, if you are a low-income earner, you will get something back. But again, for the rest of the population, the higher, middle, and higher earners, there's nothing coming back. You're just paying 9 cents extra tax. That's about it. So is it changing the world? Is it making the world a better place? Well, last week we saw an access to information request from Black Box Reporter, which is a small but ferocious journalist publication in Ottawa. They found that the carbon tax has not been working in BC. They procured a report from the Department of Environment, and the department had reviewed it in a national inventory report to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And so they said that greenhouse gas emissions in BC increased by 10% from 2015 to 2018, just in 4 years, to a total of 65.5 million tons. So cars and trucks, more emissions. Even though taxpayers are providing $3,000 rebates for electric car buyers, it went up. So the question it raises here is how effective are these carbon taxes? And now that the federal government has a carbon tax and it's imposed it on those who don't want it, provinces, everyone's got it in Canada. And as the former environment minister to say, we price pollution. Now, that's a phrase that you'll often hear. Pricing pollution works, but the question here is, does it work? And I think the reason why it's not working in the sense that the Department of Environment reported is simply that fuel use, given the realities of our transportation fleets, they have internal combustion engines. They burn a lot of gasoline and diesel. When the economy is going strong, there's more things moving around burning fuel, and therefore emissions go up. So if you want to lower emissions, probably the quickest thing to do, the most effective way, is to slow down the economy. But of course, there's not a lot of support for slowing down the economy for that purpose. So, they're also doing things like trying to change the nature of the fuel that we use so it has less emissions that come out of it, which leads to a whole other issue that we're starting to hear more about, Jim, and that's the clean fuel standard.
Well, remember when China stopped taking Canadian canola? And so there's, millions of tons of that stuff laying around. And I thought, right then, why couldn't the federal government convert that to biodiesel? But right now, you said for BC to meet its clean fuel standard, we're importing fuel from South America?
Well, there are blends. So in order to meet the clean fuel standard, every year, the emissions intensity of the fuel we put in our gas tanks in BC has to go down. And there's different ways that it can go down. If you want to see a richer discussion of this, the BC Utilities Commission in their gasoline study last year had some good insights into this. If anyone's looking for a deep dive, but just top level is you can change the ingredients of gasoline, because gasoline is not just one thing. It's not just put some crude oil through a refinery and there's your there's additives, there's all sorts of ingredients and blends and mixes, and if it's the winter season, it's different than the summer season, what they mix up, and the clean fuel, emissions lowering, program has partly affected what goes into the blend. But there's another part too, which is the processes. So if a refinery is changing, lowering the emissions that come out of its equipment during the refining process because they've upgraded something or changed the kit, that's another way that you can lower emissions. And then I believe there's also carbon trading markets. So there's kind of like three pathways that you can lower your emissions. And it's up to industry to figure out how to do that. The rules aren't necessarily set for that, but the goals are set. So they have to show that. And part of it is that, we have, I'm not saying this happens every day or every week, but there's certainly been documented times when cargoes of certain special additives come in from Singapore to go into the fuels that we use. So here we are having to use our finite reserves of foreign currency as the world's third largest oil reserve country, to source a specialty refined product from the other side of the planet, the other side of the Pacific Ocean, in order to meet a local environmental mandate. It's interesting. I don't think a lot of people know about that, but it's one of the things. If you read Jack Mintz's column last week, it's headlined in the Financial Post, Liberals' latest plan to penalize Western energy is exactly what Canada doesn't need. Well, Dr. Mintz is talking about, he's an economist from Alberta, talking about the Clean Fuel Standard, which is coming in at the federal level. So like a lot of things on environmental policy, BC is the first one in, and then the rest of the country looks at it and says, okay, should we do that or not? Well, in this case, they're saying, yeah, let's do it. And that's Clean Fuel Standard. So it's supposed to reduce GHG emissions. What Jack Mintz is saying is that with this new regulation, it's going to hammer the Western resource industries, in particular oil and gas. And right now, what's our carbon tax per ton, Jim? I forget exactly, so don't quote me, but it's, a $40, $50 range. Well, the Clean Fuel Standard would be equivalent to $350 a ton. So, that's a major increase. If done this way federally, it would increase the cost of heating and transportation costs. It's going to hit households and businesses. It's funny. It's going to discriminate against the end user, but it's not going to affect certain industries like aluminum and cement. And so part of the idea here is, they don't just want your money. They want to see you drive electric cars instead. But right now, clearly people prefer bigger cars. 12 years ago, the most popular vehicle in Canada was a Honda Civic. Today, Ford 150 is the number one selling vehicle. And SUVs long ago crossed from being the dominant type of vehicle driven over passenger cars, sedans. So that's the world we're in now. Consumers prefer these bigger cars. The taxes are saying, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be driving something smaller or an electric car, but only something like 5% of vehicles out there, or well less than 5%, are non-emitting vehicles. So the gap between what we do and what tax policy says we should do is quite large. And the problem here, according to Jack Mintz, is that we're going to see a highly unpopular measure that's politically popular in some regions of the country, used to disadvantage the resource and energy rich parts of the country, which is sort of a classic scenario that we've seen in Canada before. Now, hopefully we don't go there. This Clean Fuel Standard has not been enacted yet. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There's going to have to be, I think, at some point, an acknowledgement that in order to move forward, we're going to have to invest in the things that are more constructive and positive and innovative. And that's the whole thing. I mean, it's almost like a completely different philosophy that is one that we're talking about in the Real Jobs, Real Recovery Report, where we're saying instead of shunning these things that have made Canada this beacon of freedom and prosperity in the whole world, our resource industries, instead of, trying to shut those down, what if we were to build them up? But in order to address these legitimate environmental concerns, let's invest in the innovation and policies that will allow us to achieve those environmental goals, as well as the goal of living the quality of life that I think all Canadians want.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Value from success, growth in discovery. Golden Arrow Resources is a well-funded gold-copper exploration company with proven management and prospective properties in Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay. Golden Arrow trades on the Toronto Venture Exchange, symbol GRG, on Frankfurt, symbol G6A, and the OTCQB, symbol GARWF. For more information, visit us at goldenarrowresources.com or call Sean at 778-686-0135.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, next week is National Forest Week in Canada. What does that mean for natural resource development?
Yeah, well, National Forest Week, it's been celebrated for 100 years. So this is the centenary of it. And this year, actually, in BC, ResourceWorks, which is the group that I'm executive director of based in Vancouver, we're partnering with the Canadian Institute of Forestry, which is based in Ottawa, but it's a national group, to mark National Forest Week at the municipal level. So all kinds of municipalities in BC have been declaring it National Forest Week next week in BC. That's September 20th to 26th. Surrey, Prince George, quite a few communities are saying, we stand up for forestry, which is really crucial to hear, because right now we're also in the midst of a public policy discussion in BC that could affect, probably will affect, the course of our most renewable industry, which is forestry. Trees, they grow back, and one of our best managed. At UBC alone, we have a historic faculty of forestry. There's 50 professors of forestry at UBC. They've trained generations of foresters. We're really one of the best jurisdictions in the world in terms of having scientific forest management, which is why we do have such a well-managed land base right now. Now, there was a report that came out on Friday. It was called the Old Growth Review. It looks at some of the claims that have been made over time about the future forestry. There is a sort of alarmist view that says old growth, which is, say, old trees, which are on the coast, are ones in excess of 200 years old, should be protected because they're not coming back. Well, trees, they do grow and they get bigger every year. When they're young, they store a lot of carbon, which is a good thing. And we are also seeing the lesson in California right now, where decades of fire suppression have allowed this enormous storehouse of dry tinder to develop, such that when we get a fire this year, it's all exacerbated by climate change, that's acknowledged, but because of human practices to suppress fire, you've got this incredible accumulation. And look at the situation down there. And that's coming to BC if we approach things the same way they are, because the climate is changing in BC too, and that's one of the problems. If we have actively managed forests where over time they are subject to timber harvesting that is protecting ecosystems and the biodiversity, allowing for cultural values and First Nations to be involved in the economy, then we can have a good outcome. But you contrast that with one of the prominent voices in BC, which is the sort of museum voice, which is, you can't touch any of this. Nature made it. Mother Nature's work mustn't be tampered with. So turn all of the forest into a big museum. No one's allowed in. We can't cut anything. We can't do anything. And we have to suppress the fires that nature would regularly run through these habitats because, we don't want to see them burn. It adds up to a potential, probable, if not certain, problem down the road. And as the Old Growth Report showed last week. And if anyone wants more details, you can just Google BC Old Growth Report. You'll find the link easily enough. It's a fascinating read. There's a lot of interesting science in there, and actually some good things about the need for public education in these issues. But if we do follow that California model, I think those who study forest science are kind of alarmed about how things could go. So that's an issue to watch.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, is there something special going on with the Alberta Oil Sands right now?
Oh, I think it's an interesting time. We've seen oil prices drop to even into the negative territory. Remember earlier in the year, that bizarre phase back was it March?
April,
April, yeah. People would pay you, and there were entrepreneurs. I read about one group of guys in Texas. They said, okay, we have to find all the containers we can get our hands on so we can buy oil, actually have people pay us to take oil. So these young guys did that. I don't know how it went for them, but I don't know if they used swimming pools or what, but they got any sort of oil storage containers they could scrape together and got that oil in there so that later, because they knew oil would come back up, they would be able to sell it for massive profit. And of course, oil prices did go back up, and they are, relatively speaking, they're strongly recovered. I think they're not at the price level that is signaled by the present prospect of production in the United States, which has been hammered. Shale oil has been destroyed by pandemic pricing and will struggle to come back, which should be good for oil prices. There's been restraint in production across OPEC, and others have restrained. We've cut our production. So all of this, has had the effect of increased oil prices and the likelihood that they will be into late 2021, a bigger increase. And so it is that when I hear people like Elizabeth May say, oil's dead, and recently I was reading in the Globe and Mail that same thing, that the oil sands in Canada are finished, the dream's dead, it wasn't a very good dream to begin with, and this kind of stuff. I'm really skeptical of that because oil prices do fluctuate, and here's a proof point of that. I think back in May, when the federal government published its guidance on which sectors of the Canadian economy were critical infrastructure, which were essential, number one on the list was energy and utilities. And why is that? Well, they decided that without refineries, pipelines, terminals, road and rail transport, control rooms, I'm reading a list here, it's a long list, drilling, extraction, onshore and offshore production, processing, gas stations, truck stops, chemical manufacturing, that's just a few. There's a longer list. We would not be able to conduct life as we know it. And, I've been talking about trade earlier in today's spot, and it's true, that to get the stuff we can't make ourselves, like orange juice, iPhones, vaccines, we have to figure out a way to do that. The future of this, the idea that it's a dying dream is not supported by the fact that we have got an improving oil sands sector. We've seen in recent years that under pressure to decrease emissions, our oil sands have lowered their emissions intensity. The oil sands have decreased by 29% since 2000. It's going to drop another 23% by the end of this decade, and that's the right track to be on. So, anyone who's looking at these occasional headlines, and they seem to be popping up all over the place, that oil's dead, it's like you have to ask yourself, well, what's going to replace it? Yeah, we know there's alternative energy and renewables, and that's great. I mean, the more, the better. You know, any sensible person would say that, and I certainly think that. But the fact is, you know, as the International Energy Agency reported, we're going to see a continuing increase in growing economic markets for oil, growing appetite. Asia is going to be probably 77% of oil demand growth. You know, here in Canada, USA, Europe, we're flatlining. There's not going to be any projected increase in how much fuel we consume, according to the experts. But that will not be so across the Pacific, where you do have these large populations that are in energy poverty. They want to get more energy in their lives, and you know they will. There's no point in trying to stop them, because by hook or by crook, whether they source their fuels from Russia or Saudi Arabia or Canada, they're going to get fuels to power their economies, and it may as well be from those that have the highest ESG, environment, social, and governance performance. And Canada is out of the largest energy exporting countries, we are the highest ranked in ESG terms. So there's not a better place to do this. So I put some thoughts together. They're going to be published in the Globe and Mail this week.
The U.S. says it is now going to back down on its $3.6 billion in tariffs on Canadian aluminum, as Ottawa was about to impose a similar amount of penalties on U.S. products.
Yeah, that's a smart move by the U.S. That was a reckless initiative in the first place. We've been talking a lot today about environment. Well, Canadian aluminum is some of the greenest aluminum in the world. The reason for that is simple. Where we put our aluminum smelters is not by accident adjacent to low cost and very green hydroelectricity. Quebec, BC, up in Kitimat, this is where we make aluminum. It's a great product and the world wants it. To penalize it seems reckless and just punitive for no good reason. So thank goodness for that. Of course, there's another dimension to aluminum products, which is they're so in demand, whether it's for consumer or military or industrial needs in the U.S. They need Canadian aluminum. You know what I'll bet happened? It's probably not anything that Ottawa could say that would make a difference to the mindset in Washington. They listen to their own industry, probably their own industry, military, industrial complex, saying, you can't do this, that's ridiculous. And now they've backed off.
Stewart, Canada is getting its first rare earths plant in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Is that a positive move for Canadian natural resources? Because you can remember when Donald Trump wanted to buy Greenland, which belongs to Denmark, because of their rare earth resources. Canada, apparently, even though China's the big producer of them, Canada has the most rare earths in the ground that can be developed. Is this all good news for Canada?
Yeah, well, just so in case anyone has just tuned in, doesn't know what a rare earth is, it's not like a rare steak. A rare earth, it's any group of chemically similar metallic elements. And it's quite obscure things that we all had the periodic table in school. This is a part of the periodic table we all forgot about. We know what hydrogen and lithium and stuff is, but these ones, they're quite obscure. They're distributed around the crust of the earth, often in very diluted form. And there are some places where they occur in greater concentration in deposits where they can be mined. China is the biggest source of rare earths, which is a geopolitical problem. China is happy, I'm sure, to have that, but I was contacted not long ago by someone from Korea who was fretting about having Republic of South Korea being dependent on China. They were uneasy with that dependency, and they were saying, hey, can we get some rare earths from Canada? And I connected them up with some folks. Now, a rare earth, if you're listening on your iPhone right now and you swipe with your finger across that screen, you can do that because there's a rare earth used in the manufacture of that screen that lets you successfully do that. You could swipe any piece of glass, nothing happens, add rare earth, and all of a sudden we have the magic of the iPhone, the smartphone. These are needed for the technology age that we're in. They are needed for the energy transition age that we are in. And so that's why they're going to be in greater demand. The fact that in Saskatchewan we've got investors who are saying, let's get into this. It's a very smart strategic move. There's also a parallel trend here towards critical elements, critical metals. We're seeing Canada taking the lead in this. In fact, that's something that comes into our recent task force for real jobs, real recovery. Our group from across Canada did discuss rare earths and critical elements at some length, and we feel that that is a legitimate opportunity. Canada has got a sizable percentage of rare earth potential, globally speaking, but we can do much, much more. And if you go to any mining exploration show that concerns especially the north, you will see lots and lots of booths from exploration companies that are going after this potential. So it's an exciting time to be in that space. I think one, as an investor, should probably be cautious about things they see. Ask critical questions and go in eyes wide open. But in terms of just high concept, it's definitely the age of specialization of elements that we're moving into, and you have to get those from somewhere.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks, Jim. My
guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. His website, resourceworks.com. His Twitter handle, @SJMuir. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.